Okay, I'm nervous slash excited about this because I've never done this with anyone before. So we are just gonna see what comes up
Okay,
and
sure.
we'll go in whatever direction. I just wanted to say, I think I shared with you over WhatsApp why I invited you to be the first guest, and I just wanted to share that again. And it's really because when I started this podcast and I was thinking about what brought me to this realization, the first person to bring me to this realization that a path of uncertainty is actually beautiful and that it can be an enjoyable process. The first person that came to my mind was you. And if I think back to those years, like the first time I met you, which was like 9 years ago now, um, I think the pre and the post Lee me is a very different version of myself. And I think you're the first person in my life to show me that this path is even possible. Like, I think before that, I think the people around me and my family, we always like walk the traditional Singaporean path. So there
Mm.
was never that window open to me. I've never seen someone living this way and that this way can be thriving. I think that's the important part as well, to see that that is an actual path that I can walk one day too. So I think I really wanted to start by thanking you for showing me that. I might just start by sharing first impressions of like where we met, how we met, and then you can
Was
also
that at home
share yours.
yoga?
Huh?
Was that at home yoga or was it at the Sri Lanka retreat?
No, it was at home. So how we met was I joined home when I was not when I was in 2017, I think, and I joined home before Hong Bin, my husband,
Mhm.
and I think at that time you were on break or something, so you weren't on the schedule when I first joined. I'm not sure
My
if that
aunt
is.
was sick at that time.
Yeah, so you weren't on the schedule. I was going for other classes. And then one day, Hong Bin just came back and told me he attended this fabulous class in home yoga. And he was raving about it. And it's quite rare for him to rave about yoga class because I feel like he started yoga because of me, not because he liked yoga. So I decided to check you out, and I think that was really something that changed my life. The way you taught, it just felt very different. Like I felt like for the first time I could feel my body, and now I can feel my body. It's like a very natural thing to me. But looking back 9 years ago, feeling my body was something that was very unimaginable. It was like a new feeling. Like it's
Mm.
almost as though 9 years ago I never felt it before. Yeah,
Mm.
so that really changed me. And after that, we decided to go for your Sri Lanka retreat. Was that your
It was
first?
your honeymoon.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So we planned to go to New Zealand for our honeymoon in 2018, but because you were holding the retreat, and it was, I think, one day after our wedding. I think it was
Yes,
the
you
next day.
came from your wedding.
Yes. So we abandoned the New Zealand plan to go for your retreat. Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah, that was how we got to know you better. Was that your first retreat? Uh,
Officially, yes.
mm.
Unofficially, I had my first one in 2015 in Bali.
So that was the first
Yeah,
official retreat. It
officially
was,
it
yeah,
was
yeah, that was really nice.
2018, correct?
2018. And then after that, we went for North India as well in 2019. And then got
Correct.
to know you better. Yeah, so that's my side of the getting to know you story.
Mhm.
Oh, and then YTT did the yoga teacher
Correct.
training with you in 2019, your
Correct.
first batch of babies.
Correct. That was after Sri Lanka and before North India.
Mm. Yeah, and I still remember sitting at the table with you in Sri Lanka, and that was when you put forward the possibility of you holding a YTT. I feel like I think at that time it wasn't confirmed yet. And I think that conversation also shifted something inside me because I never thought that I could be a yoga teacher. Like, because I'm not flexible, I still am not. And that idea of being a yoga teacher it was something that was closed until that conversation we had. That was like, oh, you mean you don't need to do all those things to be a yoga teacher? So I wanted to ask you about your teaching philosophy as well later on. But before that, maybe I'll leave you to maybe share your side of this how we met story and also introduce yourself. I feel like your self-introduction evolves over the years, so I think it'll be
It
interesting
does.
for me to hear the current version as well.
Okay, so I'm supposed to share my first impression of us meeting, correct?
Or like of
Mm.
us, of me.
Okay. I, to be honest, so many students come in and out of home at that time. Classes were huge, right? 40 plus people. So I really don't have a strong impression of whether we met in the studio. But the strongest impression I have, first impression, was when you guys came for the Sri Lanka retreat. And I think I had this moment, I'm like, huh? Honeymoon? Like, what am I supposed to do for them? Like put swans on their bed or
You
something.
did
Like
though,
swans.
and you gave us the honeymoons, you gave us the better
Correct.
room.
Yeah, I spoke to Davinda, who is sadly left this world, but he was very supportive in sort of like helping me make it memorable in yogic way. So sorry, my cat just jumped up.
Yeah.
They're a little bit noisy now.
Oh, they are welcome
Yeah.
to join us.
They will, maybe.
Okay.
So that was my first impression. And the second thing I remember was you telling me that you're afraid of dogs, and Davinda had
Mm.
too. When you said dinner table, like sitting at the dining table, my first sort of like recall was I think we were sitting near each other, and Prince, I think one of the dogs
The
was
black
called
one.
Prince. Correct. And he was like trying to nose his way. He liked to sniff at people's crotches. And I was like, okay, Jasmine is scared, better like get him away. Like that was my sort of
Yeah, now I remember.
my first memory of us. And then yeah, I felt like I started to get to know you better on that retreat. Hong Bin as well. I remember you, me, Hong Bin and Fagan, we sat around chatting for quite a little bit. So I felt like those were great conversations. But I feel like my friendship with you probably deepened on our Bali trip.
Yes, I
Kind of
remember
like
that
impromptu
one.
Bali trip, remember?
Yes,
Yeah, I don't even
2019.
know who booked it first, but somehow we were both at the same place. And I had finished my past life regression therapy training, and I told you I need to like do this on a couple of people. And yeah, you so gamely agreed. And I remember we spent the entire day together.
We did.
Went for yoga, we did the regression, we went for a massage, we went for dinner, and then we came back and we unpacked the regression. So I
Mm,
think I remember like we spent a lot of time together on that little holiday. So that's when I felt like I really got to know you better. And I also feel like at that time, we spoke a lot about, your relationship with certainty or your relationship with needing to know how things unfold. And I don't know how much you remember of the regression. Can I
I
talk about?
remember. Yes, I remember a lot. I remember most of it.
Can I talk
You
about
can
it?
talk.
Yeah, so like you were saying something about your Hong Bin has always wanted to live overseas, but you're not so sure about that, among many other things from that regression. And that was when I got a full grasp of how important certainty was to you at that time. Yeah. And then I remember, I mean, we saw each other in Singapore a lot. We went out on double dates quite a bit as well. And then you moved to Melbourne.
Mm,
Yeah, which I felt like, sort of like thinking of the regression and your decision to then move to Melbourne. I thought that was such a beautiful leap of faith. And then we met together again on my digital detox retreat. And I felt like you shared with me that that was sort of like that tipping point for you in making your decision to become a counselor, like something clarified
yeah.
in that digital free world that we created. I think that moment was when I felt very proud of you, very proud of your clarity, but more of your growth and your willingness to leap into the unknown. Because when you figured it out for yourself, you were like rock solid. I didn't feel like there was any doubt in you. And I
Mm,
didn't feel like you were asking around, asking for affirmation or further clarification. I remember on the last day of the closing circle, you just shared with us, you know what? I came here, I sat in the quiet, and this is what I figured out for myself, and this is what I'm going to do. And many people say they want to do things and end up not doing them, but I think you went back and you very quickly put your new sort of direction into plan so that I felt I was very proud to witness that from the sidelines. Yeah, I wanted to say something else, but I forgot. But yeah, so that's my
Yeah.
take on our friendship.
Thank you. I just wanted to add also how clarifying that digital detox retreat was for me. I think it's a combination of you, the sunrise, the place,
Mm,
and the digital detox. And I still remember it happened when I was journaling, when we were watching the sunrise. It was so
mm,
beautiful. I still remember that. And there was just this very strong feeling that this is what I have to do. It's not even a maybe you can consider doing it. It wasn't. It was just a like it's just something you have to do. And it just felt so right. And it just felt like to the extent that it wasn't something that was negotiable within my life anymore.
mm,
Um I'm willing to tear down the structures that I had built that weren't mine to begin with, to
yeah.
build this new one. Um, yeah, so that was quite pivotal for me, that experience. And I also remember very consciously saying it out loud. Like,
Mm,
usually when I have these kind of thoughts, I don't want to say it because sometimes you say it out and it's like people know you don't want to paise, you don't want to embarrass yourself then
yeah.
if you don't do it. But
Mm.
I think, so certain of it that I remember in our sharing circle, I just said it, like, just came to me and I wanted to share it. So yeah, I still remember that moment.
I remember what I wanted to say as well, which is that was my first digital detox that I hosted. And the way I came to the idea for the detox was very much like what you shared. When the idea landed, it was non-negotiable. Like I just had to do it. But then, sort of witnessing your shift during the detox, along with a few others, they had their own little mini pivotal journeys on their own. That also solidified my intention to offer this as a sort of annual retreat because,
Mm,
yeah, I think until then, a lot of my retreats are very destination based or very like cultural or festival based, a lot in
mm,
India, to be honest. But then this was sort of like at that time a whole new ball game for me that I felt would really benefit whoever comes. And
mm.
for me, it's sort of like seeing my idea sort of take root in you guys. That was sort of really encouraging for me also.
And now you just keep running it every year, right? Every year in the
Yeah.
same place.
You came in 2023?
I think so. Was it? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that
So
was
this
yeah.
year I'm running the fourth.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. 4 years already.
Yeah, fourth year.
Yeah, I think there is just something about, I think it's also the place that you selected. And also, I think safety is something that is very important for digital detox retreats as well, that you and that space provided. I still remember a large part of my reservation was what if um, my family needs to contact me urgently? What if this, what if that, what if something happens, right? But I think you have set it up in a way that um, if anything, it will be fine. Like I will be contactable if needed. Um, and so I think with those structures in place, it just felt like, um, I mean, I couldn't relax immediately. I think as with the other participants' experiences, but I think over some time, then you realize, oh, it's actually beautiful to not have your phone. And I
Mm,
was actually quite resistant to getting it back.
yeah.
It's like sian to have to deal with all these things again. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really nice experience.
And I also felt when I went to that place, it reminded me a lot of where we went to in Andretta. It's sort of
Mm,
like a little sanctuary, not with the Himalaya views, but we had Mount Agung, which is also really powerful and special.
like
Mm.
it's its own cocoon somewhere in the
Right.
mountains.
Away
Later.
from sort of like too much civilization.
Now for yourself, intro.
Hmm.
Doesn't need to be a formal one, but however you would like to share about yourself, where you're
Okay,
at now.
so I'm Leigh and I teach yoga, but more importantly, I feel like my intention or my dharma in this life is to share the teachings of yoga in a way that honors its roots,
Mm,
which is why, we can talk about the whole philosophy later. So it
Yeah.
honors its roots, but at the same time is not complicated or esoteric. I think when people think of yoga in this day and age, they either go straight to the asana side of it, or they think like yoga is so woo-woo, with all like the Reiki and the singing bowls and all of that.
Mm,
But all of that are just additions to the practice. They are not the practice on its own. And yoga ultimately is about being able to understand and work with our mind.
mm,
It's one way. You have another way that you're doing now. But yeah, I think this is what I feel I am responsible for doing in the community in Singapore, at least for now. And that has evolved a lot from the start of my teaching journey, where it was a lot about individual expression of your body through the asana, which is why, when we met for the first time, you said you felt your body for the first
mm,
time. Yeah,
mm,
so I still very much believe in that, but I think I have understood and studied yoga enough from the years since to understand that it is that, but also way more than that.
mm.
So that's me, and I love to lead retreats. I am on the go quite a little bit. So I'm actually glad that we chose today because I told you I'm going off to India, and I ended up bringing forward my
Oh,
travel date. So I'm actually leaving very early on Tuesday morning.
wow.
So this is like the last or second last sort of engagement, and then the weekend I just take to pack and prepare. Yeah, I
Off
don't really
again.
know what else to say. Is that enough?
Yes, that's enough. I think hearing you speak, a question that came up for me is let's go into your teaching philosophy because I'm curious about that as well. What are your thoughts now about studios that offer, I don't even know whether to say, use the word contemporary because then that feels like your way is ancient. Not that kind of difference, but you know the kind of studios I'm talking about that offer the more asana based ones. What are your views about that kind of yoga practice?
Feel it gets people in the door. I think many of us did start yoga in that way. Like for me, I definitely did. I enjoy the physicality of yoga. I enjoy knowing how far my body could go. I enjoy, sort of celebrating the little wins whenever I unlocked a complicated asana. So I feel like what contemporary studios are offering, that definitely gets people in the door, as opposed to not knowing what yoga is about. But I
Mm,
feel the limitation is when that becomes all to the yoga practice. So I feel like I run a studio before, which is something
mm.
I'm never going to do again in my lifetime, I think. Although never say never. But I feel like it's a tough job running a studio,
Mm,
needing to make the numbers work, needing to offer something that is palatable enough to get the
mm,
numbers in through the doors. And then on top of that, if you're talking about really wanting to honor what the practice of yoga entails, then also adding that layer of that to whoever is coming in. And then people
mm,
who walk in for the asana, they may then find like, wow, what is this whole philosophy thing? It's not really my thing. So, it's a lot of eggs or balls that studio owners have to juggle. And I really feel like it's not an easy job. And I do
mm,
feel like all the studio owners out there who are still doing it, I really take my hats off to them. That's
mm.
how I wanted to start with. But yeah, like I said, the limitation is when people then assume that this is the only sort of container that yoga is. So this is the only perimeter that yoga
Mm,
of. But
mm,
most of the time, even when I get people enter my trainings or they enter my workshops, things like the yamas and the niyamas, they don't really have a good idea about that. And I don't blame them because if all you do is a 60-minute class a couple of times a week,
mm.
how are you ever going to sort of like have the opportunity and the time to even understand a little bit of the deeper wisdom of yoga?
And a lot of times those studios don't mention it at all, even.
I really
Right.
don't know. I haven't
Mm,
been to a studio, at least in Singapore, for a long time. But
mm,
I think some definitely do. Like, I've met yoga teachers in Singapore who are very passionate about yoga philosophy. But it also depends Is the studio supportive of them sharing yoga in that way? Or does
Mm,
the studio want to play it safe? Because I think the structure of thinking, at least in Singapore, and I can speak for myself because I grew up in this society, is that anything we don't understand, we tend to approach it with a little bit more reservation and trepidation and fear.
mm,
And, yoga philosophy, the why and the science of why do we chant Om, why do we chant mantras, if people don't understand, then they often approach it with like, what is this, like, is it religious? Is it going to go against, I don't know, other spiritual practices that I have, for
mm,
example? So I feel maybe in a bid to walk the safe and secular path, a lot of yoga's philosophy has then been sort of diminished or
mm,
diluted. But I
mm.
can see why also, because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. If you can't even make the books sort of like balance the books, then, how can you be even thinking about all these other things?
Like you still have to feed yourself. You still have to. It's a business after all, right?
It's a business, and you're also responsible to your employees, the teachers, the
Mm.
cleaning staff, receptionists, all of
Mm.
that.
So in the way that
Hmm.
your business is structured now, how is this something that you have to balance, or do you feel like you have enough of people who are already in that space of learning about yoga in this way that connects to its roots? Yeah, so that becomes less of a consideration. How would you describe? Yeah.
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about when we ran Meghalaya, the
Mm,
Shala.
yeah.
So the decision to open a space was not one in like, I had never dreamed of owning a yoga studio. Like, I was not one of those teachers. But in one of my Andretta retreats in North India, the later ones, not the one that you were on, I had already left home. I had already left studio teaching for, I think, almost 2 years. And a few of the participants, they said, you know what? Like, next time, if we want to practice with you, we have to buy an air ticket, is it? And it was like casual and it was joking, but it left a very strong impression in my memory. And I felt like, you know what? In a way, that makes it's almost like I'm segregating who can practice and who cannot. Because,
Mm,
like going on a retreat, it takes monetary and time investment, so to speak. So that sort of seeded in my mind. And I think later that very same year was when I opened Meghalaya. And I wanted to run it not like a commercial studio. Uh, it was only 10 mats, maximum 11, including the teacher's mat. And we only had one class a day.
mm,
So we always, Stacy, who is my business partner or was my business partner for Meghalaya, we always joke. It's like we're running a senior center or like a community center. But I also learned that doing that, just one class a day, definitely does not help the business.
mm,
So how did we get here? You're asking me about my business
yeah.
philosophy. But I also wanted to be honest to myself because I left studio teaching because I recognized the limitations of it. And I left a very comfortable arrangement and setup with studio teaching. But it was like exactly what you described when you were journaling during the sunrise, and something in you just realizes that this structure that you have built has to crumble in order
Mm,
for your truth, or in order for you to stand in your truth in that way. That was what I felt when I left studio teaching. And I wanted to honor that. It didn't make sense to leave that structure and then create another structure. So I think with Meghalaya, we were very intentional about the type of classes that we offered. Classes were never 60 minutes, they were at least 75 minutes. And on the weekends, we made sure to always offer workshops, immersions, special sessions, so people can sort of access or taste the depth and the breadth of yoga. In many ways, Meghalaya was a place I wish I could have found and practiced at when I was sort
mm,
of like at the start of my yoga journey. I've sort of tasted the asana, and something in me was like, you know what? There has to be more. There has to be more, but I didn't know where to go.
mm.
So, yeah.
So you created something that you wish you had back
Great.
then.
Yeah. And I
Mm,
feel like I also knew that it was not something that I wanted to do for a long time, so I only took a 1 year lease. And leading up to the 1 year, again, I was very sure, like, yeah, it has its time and it's 1 year
Mm.
container to be beautiful. But I feel like I digressed from your question.
You didn't? I think this was part of it.
Okay.
I think when you were speaking, something that I wanted to ask you was also, it sounds like your journey from a stable job, I don't know how many years ago now, more than 10 years ago, like when you were doing journalism,
Oh, more than 10, yeah.
like seeing you journey through this, like becoming a yoga teacher in a studio, then doing retreats, like YTT teacher training, opening a studio, now not opening a studio. It's like there were so many changes over the past
Yeah.
more than 10 years. And I'm just wondering how this journey feels for you now, like when you look back at the
Mhm.
you more than 10 years ago having that journalism job to like this point. How does it feel?
Journalism in 2013, full
Mm,
time. Although
okay.
when I started teaching, I was still sort of like freelancing here and there for a couple of years. Looking back, people often ask me like, "Oh, you must be so brave to quit journalism to go and study yoga and then teach yoga." But I would say I wouldn't give myself any credit for that because I was young. I was in my mid-20s, and at that time, I didn't have a family, I didn't have a house to finance. My parents were still relatively youngish and healthy. I didn't feel like I needed to consider a lot of stuff before I made that
Mm,
decision. But it was again that moment where I was in my journalism job. I felt like I had gotten to where I wanted to get to. I made editor at a really young age, and I just knew like I was done. And it was again one of those like moments where you're like, okay, this dream of mine that I had since I was a teenager, it actually ends now.
mm,
And the last sort of like 2 months where, I was serving my notice and waiting to sort of go to Bali for teacher training, I cried so much because recognizing that what I was doing was out of alignment, but needing to do it anyway, it felt like it took a lot from me to sort of stay in that system and in that structure. So I would say my life really is a series of having these moments and learning to never suppress them
mm.
and to let them sort of lead me in the direction that unfolds next. Does it make sense? Yeah.
So
So, I mean, it's been
yeah,
a lot of changes, a lot of sort of like back and forth, side and side. But
yeah.
I think if anything, I feel like I've been 101% true to myself.
And if I could pry open your mind or your body or your experience at those moments. Okay, so what you described sounds like okay, you are always checking in with yourself whether something is in alignment. When it's not, you just know something needs to go. You go through something that I don't know if you will consider it as grief or like letting go that process where you
Mhm.
shed that one, then you jump into the next one, and then that happens. Did I describe it accurately? Like that's what happens.
Yes, but hardly there's grief, to be honest. It's almost like you outgrew the clothes and now they're too
Mm.
tight and you just have to take it off. And when you take it off, it's like relief because you didn't have to suck in your stomach anymore.
Ah, relief. Okay,
That's
that's
how I feel.
interesting. Okay, the word that came to my mind was naked, which is what I think a lot of people experience. That's why they just keep the clothes on even when it doesn't fit. But you said it feels relief. That's like the other side of that experience, right? It is naked and it's also relief, right? Because factually, yes, you're taking it off. Is there any part of you that experiences the relief not as a good thing? Or is it for you always like a feel like I'm just gonna take it off and wear something else?
I think that final moment of taking the clothes off is always a good thing for
Mm,
me. But in the lead up to taking the clothes off, in the lead up
mm,
to maybe considering breaking a structure that I've spent years building, for example, of
yeah.
course there is discomfort. Of course, I have to sit with doubt. I have to sit with my mind, sort of,
Mm,
playing the game of practicality things like that. So I would say that part is oftentimes uncomfortable.
Mm,
But it's
yeah.
almost like, if you've done it enough times, then you realize that what is uncomfortable is actually just your mind trying to keep you in the path of certainty or safety, which is what our conversation today is about,
Mm,
isn't it? And I don't know, Jasmine, like if there's one thing I can be very sure of, certain in this life, is that nothing is certain. Nothing.
mm,
Like even the assumption that we're going to be alive tonight or tomorrow, that is not certain. Right.
mm,
So, and I realized that if I kept putting my eggs in the basket of projected certainty, then I will never move. I will never change because, like you said, then I would just rather have clothes on, even if they're ill-fitting, than the possibility of not having clothes on at all.
mm.
I don't know. I was built this way that I just don't like to wear ill-fitting clothes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When you were saying that, I had flashbacks of like 9 years ago when you were saying something like that to me. Not maybe not 9 years ago, maybe when I was struggling on my traditional path. I think you said something similar to me. And at that point, I was like, how is it even possible to think like you? Um, because I just
Now you
needed
do.
that certainty. Yes, yes. I was like, I also feel that shift that, and now on the other side of it, it does feel like relief. But as you said, the first time, you need to do it enough times
Mm.
to experience the relief and less of the discomfort. Like the discomfort is probably still there, but less and less. Every time it's less and more manageable. But I think the very, very first time is the hardest because it's a new experience and it's so scary. Um, so I'm also wondering what was your first time like for you? When was it and how was it like for you? And how did you sit with the discomfort?
Quitting journalism and going to yoga teacher training because that sort of like the inner, what do we call it? We need to give it a name. That inner pivotal moment where
Okay.
you realize your clothes are too tight for you. That moment came a lot earlier than I wanted it to.
Mm,
So I knew that I wanted to leave and I wanted to do a teacher training, but I also had a very practical timeline for myself because I was only in my mid-20s. I hadn't been working for like 10 years, for example. So I had to be very practical about how much money I have in my bank account. I mean, I was not naive to think that I was going to quit journalism, go to yoga school, and then immediately be able to teach yoga. I buffered space for possibility. What if I realize I don't like to teach yoga? Then what's next? So I had this sort of like rough timeline in my mind, but that inner pivotal shift came way earlier. And I told you I was so miserable at the misfit that I quit a lot earlier as well. So I think I wanted to, at that time, save enough to have at least 5,000 in my bank account, just so I could come out from training and have like that money. And I didn't need that much at that time because I was staying with my parents. I don't really spend a lot of money. So I felt like 5,000 was a decent amount. But that timeline got shifted so far forward that when I came back from teacher training, I only had $17 in my bank account. So that was kind of scary.
mm,
And when I sort of came back, I knew I wanted to teach yoga. But, at that time, I didn't graduate with the knowledge about how to get a teaching job, where to get a teaching job. So I remember I was blindly sending out resumes. I was going for a lot of mocks, like
mm,
that's the way yoga teachers are interviewed. And at some point, the alarm bell in my head rang, and I started to like blindly send out resumes to like magazines, publishing,
mm.
back to that world
Ah,
that I knew so well, but I had left. I was like, oh my God, maybe I made a wrong choice. It was all fear speaking. And you know
mm,
what? I think I sent out maybe 20 resumes to all these publishing creative houses. Nobody got back to me.
mm.
But all the resumes that I sent out to yoga houses, even if it was like a no, we are not looking for anyone, everybody got back to me.
Yeah, I
So
had
now
goosebumps
that I
now.
look back, yeah, now that I look back, I realize like, Wow, the universe was like shouting in my face, like, don't go, don't
Don't go
go,
back.
don't take a U-turn. Yeah, like I'm just gonna like cop block you at every moment anyway. Yeah.
Mm,
So
mm,
that was the first time I think that I learned to sort of really listen. Because when I made the decision to quit
mm,
journalism, my dad got a stroke, like shortly
mm,
after. And I remember my managing editor at that time, he pulled me aside and he said, look, I can pretend that I didn't get your letter of resignation. Just stick it back, you know. Maybe at this point in time, you need stability more than anything. And I didn't even I didn't even think twice. I said, it's like, no, it's okay.
mm,
Yeah.
Like it was
So
so strong, the
it was so strong.
so strongly
And
out of alignment that you feel like you
correct.
had to go.
Correct. And I also feel like, you know, what we were saying, when we do this more times,
Mm,
then we have the resources that comes with experience. But then along the way, through whatever we study and whatever we practice, we also continue to build up our toolbox of resourcing.
mm.
So we can navigate that discomfort with clarity, but I would say also discernment, because the voice of fear is always pretty loud.
And what are some of the tools and resources you have now that you use to navigate whenever you feel like you have to take off?
Breath, I would say, because
Mm,
breath is the gateway to our nervous system. Meditation, you
mm,
know, it doesn't really matter what style of meditation, I think, but okay, also prayer. So I pray, I meditate, and I breathe.
mm,
And I feel like that together is quite a potent and strict combination that keeps me accountable to myself. Because, yeah, I don't know, like if you build a habit of at least a pocket of time every day where you don't allow distraction to cloud you,
mm,
then I think the truth, which is your truth, I would say, it has a way of sort of like making itself heard, you know? And if it's something that you hear once every 3 months,
mm,
maybe you can discount it a little bit. But if
mm,
every day you're sitting in that quiet and every day you're hearing something come up, then at some point you have to listen to it and at least consider it, right?
mm, mm. And what would you say is the biggest block to people you observe, like students or friends or just people around you, biggest block from taking off, shed the layer that doesn't work for them anymore?
Practical concerns, I would say. People have families to feed, housing mortgages to pay off. And I feel like we can't live in a woo world where all of that doesn't come into equation. So I feel like sustaining a lifestyle, not only for yourself, but for the people you're accountable for, I think that is pretty much most of the time the first stumbling block. Because it's almost like, you know, you may be working in this job that you realize you don't really care for, but it pays the bills, it pays your kids' school fees, it pays your parents' medical bills. You know, I think that's often the thing that comes up, you know.
Mm.
Can I really afford to leave or recreate a life when I have all this sort of riding on me?
I'm curious, what would you say to someone who names the concerns that you just said, but you can tell from knowing this person that that is, I think excuse is too mean a word, but that is like
Mm.
the reason given for not wanting to do something difficult. Like, what would you say? Say this is someone you care about and you want to support.
I actually wouldn't immediately say you must follow your heart or you must follow your soul, because I also believe in living an accountable life.
Mm,
So I would actually spend time maybe with this friend to figure out, you know, is there actually, from a practical level, ways that all these other responsibilities, financial responsibilities, can be managed?
mm,
Yeah. Or otherwise, which is why I always tell my teacher trainees, don't quit your day job. Like they
Mm,
glamorize teaching yoga, and moving from corporate to teaching often requires a pay cut, for example. So, how many of us can afford that pay cut, or what are we willing to give up? Because I feel like, let's say, the practical concerns are you can no longer afford like eating organic fruits only, but you have to sort of like scale back on that. I would say it's practical, but it's something that can be negotiated.
mm,
But if leaving your job means that you can no longer afford a annual health checkup, you can't afford like basic medicine, for example,
mm.
then I feel then maybe something there has to be a more sort of discerning alternative solution to that.
So it sounds like you will approach it from a practical. It sounds like you are entering into the space that that person is in because when someone has these concerns, they are practical. So you meet them where they are at rather than, just tell them something that they are. Basically, it's not helpful to tell them just follow your heart because that is what they are unable to do. So you
Right.
meet them where they are at and work things out on a practical level to help
Mm.
them see that it's either possible or not now, kind of thing. Is that how you?
Maybe because I don't think we should be irresponsible. Like
Mm,
I recognize that I live a life of privilege in the sense that I don't have kids, I don't have debts. The only thing I have is this housing mortgage, but that's
and
about it. But they're okay. Like,
kids.
and my cats, yeah. So I feel like, I don't have a lot of the practical responsibilities that many peers my age would have if they are parents.
Mm,
So, it's I want to be mindful of that as well. Like I can't just say to everybody, no, don't worry about it. Life will work out. The divine will take care of you. And that is woo.
So I'm also curious because I'm not sure if it's the right descriptive word, but you're a spiritual person. Is that how you
Yeah.
would describe? Yeah. So how do you balance the spiritual and the practical, being accountable, being responsible? So give you a very extreme example that is hypothetical. So let's say you receive a download spiritually that you should do something that is practically very difficult or borderline irresponsible. So that's what I'm trying to ask, if you get what I mean, like that balance.
I will pray and wait until
Mm,
I get some inner alignment.
mm,
I've learned along the way or in my journey that just because we feel it doesn't mean now is always the right time for it. Yeah, so I can feel or I can get that download really
mm,
strongly, but and okay, there's enough spirituality in me to believe that, that download was given to me on this day at this time for a good reason. But then, one of my teachers would always say, humans have discernment for good reason, So it's also then about exercising that wise mind and that
mm,
discernment to then sort of plan in a way, like how can I do this in a way that is as accountable to whoever I'm accountable to myself as
mm,
well? How can I do it in a way that causes minimal hurt, minimal
mm,
disruption, maybe things like that, I would say.
mm,
So I would say I wouldn't rush acting on that knowing. And I also
mm,
find that in the pursuit or in the practice of patience, if that knowing doesn't change and if it in fact intensifies, then it becomes very clear that this is that pivotal shift. But if that
mm.
knowing sort of ebbs and diminishes, then I feel then that maybe it's just a whim and a fancy because we're humans and we are sort of like we also have our moods and our.
So you will just hold it inside for some time. You said you wouldn't just like receive a download and act on it, right? Like it's like there is a filter, there is that discernment, there is that wise mind, period of consideration almost. I'm not sure if you'll call it that. And
Right.
just being
Right.
with it and checking how it's like ebbs, flows, or becomes more grounded or just dissipates. And
Right. It's
then,
like you're testing that download to see if it
mm,
stands up to time, basically.
and how is the experience of holding the download but not acting on it? Because I'm guessing that some people would find it very uncomfortable. Like there is that urge to just want to go there right
Mhm.
now. So how do you hold that?
I'm one of those people who want to go there right now. This is where the resourcing comes in, Jasmine. Everything, like, I believe that when we practice, so I am a big, what do you call it? Promoter or believer of daily practice. And daily practice to me is like brushing your teeth. You don't only brush your teeth when you're going to go to the dentist the next day. You brush your teeth all the time. And you do it with the trust that the next time you see your dentist, hopefully you don't have cavities to fill, right? But that brushing every day is equal to our resourcing when we practice every day. Practice works during good periods. When nothing is happening in our lives, that's when people drop out of practice because they're like, yeah, you know what? Life is great. Why would I want to practice when I can go and meet a friend for coffee, for example? But this daily practice, that is the buildup of resources for times when this equanimity that we have is challenged. Then that resourcing comes in. So whether it's a good day, a bad day, a period where I'm sitting through a lot of intense discomfort, my practice is there. So I've sat, or my practice has sat with me through my best and my worst days. And it's sort of like when I take stock of that, then it really doesn't matter. Today can be really shitty, tomorrow may be shittier, but if I practice anyway, who knows what next week would be like.
Mm. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's your anchor. You just come to it regardless,
Absolutely.
right? You're not a fair weather believer, like when you need something, then you pray. You just do it.
Absolutely not.
Can you tell
Yeah,
us
and that
yeah.
gives you, and that, or rather, that gives me that fortification or that spiritual, emotional, mental armor to sort of sit through times of challenge. And I hope it continue to that to
Mm.
support me.
And what does your morning practice consist of? Like, how do you structure it? And yeah, whatever you're comfortable to share.
So I wake up, apart from like kitty stuff, which I have to do, I shower. So I always start the day on a clean slate. I wash my hair and everything. Then I would clear the flowers from yesterday at my altar. I have it on my tables as well. I'll clear the flowers, then I'll set out fresh flowers, and then I will pray, lighting the lamp and incense and all of that. I will chant and then I will meditate. Now I will do pranayama and I will meditate. That is the structure of my mornings. Some days where the mornings is more spacious, I would do asana. And the way my life is, it is quite spacious. So most days I would have an asana practice. So I used to do the prayer and then the asana, then the pranayama and the meditation, which works. But I don't know. Of late, I like to meditate in front of my altar, like meditating in front of God. That's nice for me. So, yeah, nothing complicated or esoteric.
And if someone says to you that they want to start something like that, what is the smallest step that you would recommend that they try
It
if they
depends.
don't have a spiritual practice, for example?
Yeah. So, if I come back to the essence of yoga, the practice offers us a practical manual to rewire our tendencies. So, if my tendency is to be very high strung, which means I jump out of bed, I'm checking maybe my email in bed, I'm scrolling, you're sort of like already wiring yourself up for so much stimulation, then I feel that the best practice, just understanding the essence of working with our tendencies, then for me, it would be to have the discipline to not use your phone for whatever amount of time that you decide, maybe until after you've had your morning tea maybe. But if you're somebody who is generally very sluggish, lacks motivation, for example, then your practice might be no matter what, getting yourself out of bed, changing into like t-shirt and shorts, and then going down for a walk around your estate, even if it's only for 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Mm.
I feel like that practice that sort of goes against our not so helpful tendencies. I
Mm.
think that's so much more effective than wanting what a spiritual practice looks like.
Mm. Yeah, that's actually very helpful. So it's like the first step is just it's knowing your tendencies first, right? And then knowing what is not helpful, and then trying to correct that through that daily practice.
Correct. Like for me, when I know it sounds like, okay, maybe my daily practice is religious or spiritual, but it's also because I know my tendency is to one, to know what's going to happen. It's to believe that I'm in control of what
Mm.
happens. And I have learned enough that I am not. So praying is the first thing that I do as part of my practice, is me reminding myself that there is a power up there that is, or out there that is way bigger than me,
Mm.
that can see way beyond I think I can see. So it is, for me, my morning practice is one of surrender and reminding myself, like, hey, you know what? You don't know it. You really
Mm.
don't know. So yeah.
Mm. Do you still have that tendency come up for you, like around control, or do you feel like nowadays you're pretty not the kind who needs control anymore?
I don't think we can ever outgrow our tendencies. We can
Mm.
just outsmart them, to be honest. So because of my daily practice of surrender,
Mm.
I would say I am not as insistent on control, at least on the conscious level.
Mm.
But I feel like unconsciously or subconsciously, a lot of that probably still comes through. And here and there, I still catch myself, sometimes in retrospect.
Okay.
So I can't stop brushing my teeth, let's put it that way. I have to
Mm.
brush it for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I always remember something that you used to say when we were practicing that, like, you can't just do yoga when you think you need it. So it's kind of like that consistent practice as well, consistent, regular, um, and I think the hardest thing is that you will only realize that it's serving you when you encounter something bad and you are able to move through it with greater ease than if you didn't have that. And I feel almost that is something that can be quite hard to accept for some people until they experience that. But in order to experience that, you need to first do the practice. You need to first brush your teeth.
Correct. Because we live in a world of instant gratification. It's
Mm.
like if I do my practice for 1 week, at the end of 1 week, I should be so much calmer, I should sleep better, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Like life hardly works in that linear transactional way, isn't it? Otherwise, all the good people would be millionaires.
That's true.
Yeah.
On this path that you're on, um, I wanted to ask you what is your greatest challenge, but before that, let's talk about difficult students. I don't know why this just popped up for me.
One of the parts of your questions that I missed at the start was about this community and the people that make up this community. And I feel like over the years, the community or the kula of
Mm.
living yoga has sort of shape-shifted and evolved, that I don't offer commercial offerings, let's put it that way, right? And I don't take up paid advertisements, I don't take up sponsored ads. So, in a way, how the community grows is very organic. And if it does expand and new people do come in, they tend to come in because of word of mouth. It's like if you know my style, you
Mm.
won't recommend somebody who loves handstands to come onto my
That's
retreat because
true.
they're not going to get any handstands, right? Unless they do it on their own.
Mm.
So I think the nature of how the community around me has evolved often means that I don't really get difficult students
Mm.
because um, I wouldn't say that the barriers of entry are high. Like it's wrong to say that, but I would say it takes a very specific individual to maybe be called to step into the space or to take up what I offer.
Mm.
that most of the time they come in with their eyes wide open.
Those who are not aligned wouldn't step through in the first place. Like you wouldn't encounter them.
Hardly I do, and
Mm.
even if I do, it's almost like, if you wanted, I don't know, a baguette, but then you step into a zita store, like you would walk out, right? So yeah, I think it's very sort of organic in that way. So I can't say that, I have encountered difficult students, but maybe what sits uncomfortably with me, like what I feel like I cannot digest is um maybe students who I feel or I thought have fully understood the philosophy of yoga, but then I see like they're doing something out there that is, quite against the philosophy.
Mm.
And I think when I was more egoistic and self-centered, I used to ask myself, did I not teach them well? Did I not teach them properly? But, like I realized that I shouldn't be making it about me. So I
Mm.
would say maybe that is the part that I find difficult to digest.
Mm.
It's almost like, if this is the philosophy of yoga
Yeah.
and we have studied it together, then, maybe I can't really fully understand why people may act or behave in ways that are contrary to that.
Would you say that it's that incongruence that you find it hard to digest? Like you have a certain version of them that you thought they would be in the outside world, but it's incongruent with the version that you encountered or were with.
I wouldn't say it's incongruent or I have an idea of how they are, but
Mm.
maybe it is. Like I have high expectations, like of myself and of people. So I don't know, maybe
Mm.
that's what's causing
And what do you do with the indigestion that you
it.
experience?
Learn to hold it in my awareness.
Mm.
And I think if there's one thing the practice of yoga and the study of Vedanta has taught me, it is that if something makes me uncomfortable,
Mm.
there probably is something in me that's resonating with that discomfort. It's almost like, they say if you point one finger at a person, four fingers are pointing back at you. So I've learned not to make their choices about me in the sense like, did I not teach you properly or blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, that discomfort that arises from my witnessing of that is a reflection of me. Do you know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Yeah, like
So,
something inside is activated by that
correct.
observation.
Correct. So for me, that just shows me that I need to continue practicing and working and reflecting.
I'm curious if you would at any point point it out to them. Say if there is a possibility that they are not conscious of it, would you, I wouldn't say like take it upon yourself, but is there a part of you that feels like, I want to, say something about it? Or would you not?
It depends, like, are we in contact and did they ask for advice?
Mm.
Because I don't believe in giving unsolicited advice. Then it just comes through as judgment, isn't it? Yeah. So I wouldn't, but I also have very clear boundaries. So before I learned how to mute people, I didn't realize you could do it on
Like
Instagram until
WhatsApp or
just a while
Instagram?
ago. I would just unfollow.
Ah.
Because no point that I see something that triggers me and then,
Mm.
yeah, so I would just disassociate in that sense.
Like if it doesn't resonate or like it brings up something for you, you will just like set your boundary around it.
Correct.
And if not for challenging students that you don't really encounter nowadays, like nowadays in the work that you do, what do you
Mhm.
find the most challenging or difficult, if any? You can say there's nothing.
So many. I would say, I think what I struggle with or I sit with for an extended period of time is feeling upset or indignant when my ideas or my work is taken, stolen, or
Mm,
plagiarized, and sitting with the very human emotions that come up with that. But then also then sitting in my spiritual practice, which teaches me or reminds me that nothing was ever mine to begin with. I think that's that dichotomy that I feel like I have to navigate. A little less now in the season, but at some seasons in the past, that came up very strongly for me. Because,
mm,
like back in journalism, for example, if you plagiarized somebody's work, you can be sued, right? But there's no really such laws
mm,
governing yoga. But then that is me with a high expectation saying that even if it's legally okay, some
mm,
things are morally not okay.
mm.
Yeah, so I would say that is one big discomfort that I have.
And when you say nothing is even yours to begin with, can you describe that a little more? Like, what do you mean?
So my philosophy that has evolved over time is now understanding that a peaceful life is one where I make the decisions or I steer the ship of my life, choice through choice, choices through choices, in a way that it burdens my mind the least.
Mm,
So a lot of the things on the outside I cannot control. We were talking about my control issues, but then I get upset because somebody does something that I can control, but that pisses me off, right?
mm,
So, like I said, that control issue still comes up subconsciously or unconsciously, and I catch myself retrospectively. But basically, if I cannot change that, you know, then what I can work on is myself and my perspective. If people are copying, does that mean then I stop putting out content? Does that mean that I stop doing the work that I do or offering what I do? No, absolutely not. So the only thing that I can sort of shift is the perspective around my ownership of the things that I do.
mm,
Like I can't say I've evolved to the point that you can take my retreat itinerary and run and I'll be okay with it. But, maybe one day I'll get there. Who knows? Because at the end of the day, if I am fixated on I am right and you are wrong, that burdens my mind,
mm,
right? But if I can rewire my perspective to be like, you know what? I created what I thought I created, but maybe I don't own it. And if you take it, okay, fine. And I actually feel like I really don't own it and I'm fine with that, then the only person that benefits from that perspective shift is me because my mind is unburdened and I can continue to do what I do without reservations or doubts or, defense.
mm. So you spoke about the path that you would choose is the one that is least burdensome to your mind. Am I getting it right?
But that differs on a situation by situation basis. In some situations, it would be just unfollowing, or now I've learned how to muting something. But in other situations, it might mean having a confrontation. It
Mm,
depends, because if I'm
mm.
going to mute, but then it's going to stay on my mind for like the next 3 years, no point, right?
And have you confronted anyone around this before, and how did it go, if you did?
I
If you
wouldn't
feel
say
comfortable sharing. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I confronted somebody, but I've had a really nasty experience on one of my retreats, not with the students, but with a peer. And when her actions reflected her intentions repetitively, that I couldn't expand my perspective anymore to be okay with that, I just stopped. Like, I just stopped engaging and I stopped collaborating. I wouldn't say it's a direct confrontation because I felt like, I think in that moment for me, it was like, is there something to repair? Or is there a possibility of repair? But for me, it was a clear no. So
Mm,
when it's a no, I'm also somebody, it's sort of like once I hit my limit, then the boundary is just there. So it's not like if I see this person on the street, I would ignore the person or anything like that. I don't feel like we have to be so petty. But I know very clearly that, I would never take the initiative to engage or propose collaboration.
Not cutting someone off, but it's just letting the relationship go a bit cold, like just leave it there as it is. There's no exchange, no proactive exchange of any sort. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really see it as going cold, but just letting the relationship evolve and not try to control the direction in which it evolves. Like just because
mm,
we worked well for however number of years doesn't mean that this is going to continue forever. And to
mm,
maybe recognize the season that it's
mm.
in and respect that.
Is
I also believe in never, like if somebody asked me, like this person, like, what do you think of her? How are her classes? I would always give the truth. Like I would never say, oh, this person did this to me, so you should never go to the class.
yeah.
I don't believe in that kind of playground politics.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about teacher-student relationships. Not that kind, but
What kind? Oh, the sexual kind.
not the sexual kind. Yeah, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
General. Um, how do you, I'm not sure how to ask this question.
Jazz, you started recording already, right?
Yes, I did. Do you not see it?
No, I don't. I just
I
realized
see it on my end.
as long as you do.
Yeah, otherwise it would just be a very long, nice chat.
Which is
So we started off as teacher, student. I'm just going to use us as an example. And then we started hanging out more, talk about personal lives, and we go out on dates. And I would consider you as a teacher and a friend. Is this how you still interact with your students, or has your relationship with teaching evolved over the years? Or like, how is it like for you now?
I think it's still the same. Like, I think I went through a period where I asked myself, like, should I be creating a little bit more boundary?
Mm,
But then that boundary is not me
mm,
because I don't know. I feel like maybe you can answer, me as the teacher and me as the friend. I feel very much like the same person. It's not like when I teach, I'm completely different, and as your friend,
yeah.
I'm completely different. I feel like it's the same Lee interacting with you, and it's just the circumstances that may change.
Mm,
And I feel like, because the nature of what I do, I spend time with people overseas on retreats, or we spend so much time in teacher trainings. There will be people who come my way who I feel a natural affinity or kinship with. For example, with you,
mm,
I've met wonderful friends of mine now through yoga, and not necessarily because they are peers or fellow teachers, some of them came as retreat participants, for example. And then you sit at the retreat dinner table and you have like an amazing conversation and you realize like, wow, this person and you are really in sync, or you share a lot of like-minded interests. Then isn't it a waste just because I feel I'm the teacher and you're the student, then I cannot pursue a friendship with you? And I also find like most of the time the connection is mutual enough that like I don't always have to be the one to suggest that we go for a coffee. The person will
mm.
feel the friendship in that way. And hopefully, I don't carry myself in a standoffish way that they feel comfortable to say, hey, do you want to grab a coffee?
And what if there are people who want to grab coffees with you, but you don't want to?
And then
You
I
don't want
say,
to
no,
go.
I won't go.
And
Yeah.
I'm supposing that person will get the hint as well.
Maybe, but to be fair, I don't know. Maybe my non-verbal cues are quite strong.
Mm.
So you might not even feel comfortable to ask me out for a coffee.
Ah,
You know
okay.
what I mean?
Yeah. Something that came up for
Hmm.
me somewhere along our conversation is also, yeah, when you were talking about the challenging students, I feel like the way you come off, not the right word,
That's
um,
okay.
you're very aligned as a person. So the way you show up, yeah, show up is the word that I'm looking for. It's just you. So
Mm.
what people see is what they get. They either like it or it's not for them. So you wouldn't attract the wrong people. And I think that is it's like a natural filter for
Mm.
people who come through your doors, only because you are aligned yourself and the way you show up is aligned. And then you don't need to filter because, yeah, that is just a filter. Natural, natural.
I hope so. Like, I remember many, many years ago when I first started teaching at home yoga with my husband. I remember he sent me to work one morning and he asked me, "So, what are you teaching today?" And I was teaching a hot hatha. Remember, we have hot hatha at home. So I said, a hot hatha. And he said, "I know I'm asking you what you are teaching today." He wanted to know what more I was bringing to the table. And somewhere in that same season of my teaching career, he comes for classes at home to support me. He's not really into yoga. And then he sees me standing at the reception talking to students. And he made a comment at that time saying, like, oh, like you're so proper when you talk to them, but you're so different when you're with me and or with your friends. And I think that struck a chord enough for me to sort of sit with his observation, see that there was truth in that, and then set about the course of realigning because I felt like I didn't want to put on a persona just because I was a teacher. And, we've been friends a long time. And when we talk about life and all that, I hope I don't come through as somebody who always has her shit together. Like there are
Mm,
times when I also share with you, heartache and difficulties and all that. And I feel like I don't make an effort at all to conceal those parts of me because what? Just because we teach yoga means we must be perfect and have our lives figured out. I don't think
mm,
so. And in fact, to live yoga, like why do I name my brand Living Yoga? Is because yoga is a practice of living or life in practice, and life is never black and white. So I
mm,
feel like because I have no reservations about letting people see the parts of me that are, messy or unsure or unclear,
mm.
then I don't feel like I need to have a defense in place even. And so
Yeah.
like, it's almost like if you see that parts of those parts of me and you decide to judge me because
Mm,
of that, then that's also fine. Then naturally you also won't come and spend too much time with me, right?
that's true. Yeah. Yeah. As you were saying that, what I was thinking about was I really don't feel a difference when I interact with you in any
Mm,
setting, like whether
mm,
it's a class, retreat, or like when we hang out in Bali, in Singapore now, it feels like the same person. And I think that is very important to feel safe around someone because I
mm.
know what I'm gonna get. Like, this is what I'm gonna get. And if you are true and aligned, then I can also bring that version of myself to you. Right before this call, I was just a little bit nervous, right? Because I don't usually do things or have conversations that are recorded that are not planned.
Right.
Um, I didn't plan it beyond what I sent you, and I'm not looking at it now as well.
To be honest, I just scrolled and the only thing I saw was like, wow, so long. Okay. I didn't even like register much.
Yeah, so long, right? And I also can't remember what I wrote. But what settled me was I feel like you have seen me in my worst moments. So it's like there is nothing for me to hide from you. I can tell you I'm nervous. I can tell you I'm scared. You have seen me. I think like teaching in a YTT, like the exam that we had for YTT, I feel like that was the most scary teaching experience. And I was a teacher, right? Those were not as scary compared to that. So I feel like you've seen me in my most nervous state.
Mm-hmm.
You have seen me cry. You have seen me like feel lost in my career. So there is no, I think, no side of my vulnerability that you haven't seen. So that made me feel safe. Like, because I know that in my worst moments, I felt held by you. So it will be fine.
Thank you. That's a beautiful compliment for me. And to be fair, Jasmine, when I think of you, I hardly think of those moments of vulnerability.
Mm,
Like we don't talk all the time, maybe once every few months, but if somebody mentions your name or if I think of you, you pop into my mind. I don't know, I just think of you as a really brave person who's not afraid to follow her heart despite her conditioning and her
Mm.
tendencies.
A lot thanks to you. There is a quote that I took from your website that I wanted to ask you about, so I do need to refer to that because I can't memorize that. From Lee's website. Yoga is meant to be lived, not just practiced within the confines of a studio or a yoga mat.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about I don't think it's something you do intentionally because that's just you already. I feel like you've embodied living yoga. How do you teach people how to do that? So if someone saw this line that you wrote and they really want to experience what it's like to live yoga off the mat, what would you respond?
Come on retreat. Like, I don't know, like I feel like a retreat setting is the best opportunity to experience what it's like to live yoga. Like the itinerary or the place, of course, that would play a part in some ways, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know. Like that was the first answer that popped into my mind. But
Mm,
let's say I work once in a while, I work with one-on-one students, and I feel like for me, even in, let's say, like a 60-minute or a 90-minute session spread over, I don't know, 2 months or 3 months, the first thing I often teach them is to access their breath.
mm,
And I feel like to live yoga, of course, the ancients didn't call it that. They didn't have such a vocabulary, but I feel like to live yoga is to first understand our nervous system
mm,
so we can work with it. And, like it's almost like how can we think about accessing deeper states of consciousness if we don't even know how to feel safe in ourselves or with ourselves? So I find like, I feel like I'm going off topic, but you know, like that to me, these are the tools where you learn it maybe on the
mm,
mat or in a program, but it becomes something that I definitely hope you take it off the mat. Because
mm.
being able to access your breath, you don't need to be on a mat to do that. And you certainly
That's
don't
true.
need to be on a mat to reap the benefits of that. Like,
Mm,
I'll give you an example, and I'm sure they don't mind me talking about them. I have two longtime students, a husband and wife couple, and they're very high-powered, like bankers, very, very sort of like high achieving bankers. And again, I don't see them on a very regular basis because I travel a lot, they travel a lot. But whenever we meet for like a check-in or we're both in town and we have like a couple of sessions, they always tell me like I was in a board meeting, I got really anxious or excited because I had to present or somebody was raising a challenge at me, and I just told myself 3 deep breaths.
mm,
And that to me is the best lesson that you take from your yoga mat off and into your life. And of course, this is in like sort of like a mat setting, but then I raised up the issue of retreats because, then when you go on retreats, you maybe experience a different way to structure your day or a different way to sort of see the world, especially if you come on retreat to India, for example. And you see the way people live, the different priorities that they have, then it expands your mind. And your mind that is expanded has more space for possibilities. And that I find is also what I would say is yoga, being able to see beyond what you can see right now.
mm, mm,
Or you meet people on retreats and then you have a conversation. And then, like you met Hui Min on a
mm,
retreat.
mm.
And then you
I
guys
did.
became such good friends. And I'm sure, like, in all the time that you spend with her, you both are also expanding each other's minds, isn't it?
Mm, yeah, yeah, that's a really good point about, expanding perspectives, not just the perspective of our interaction with the environment, but I think it's also the people that you meet when
Hmm.
they are going through that expensive phase. So it's very different from meeting them going to a cafe in Singapore.
Correct.
Everyone is still in kind of a certain mind space, So you
Correct.
also don't get that expensive version of them, but in
Correct.
retreats, the conversations are just different.
Correct. And it becomes less transactional, I feel, whether it's your relationship with the yoga mat, your relationship with somebody else, or even your relationship with yourself. Because let's face it, some days I'm sure we would roll out the yoga mat because it's a transaction. I
Mm.
promise myself that I'm going to do 20 minutes of practice. You do it, and then you forget about it. But I feel like settings, people, they can really change up the boundaries of that.
Mm. And I wanted to ask you, I was
Yeah.
wondering how do you plan or if you even plan your schedule, your years, what are your considerations? Do you factor in buffers for uncertainty? What if an accident happens? Yeah, just what is going through your mind?
I just knocked on wood.
Me too.
No. The whole business of retreats is uncertain in itself, isn't it? It's a retreat running as planned is dependent on so many factors, from meeting the minimum number of signups to borders remaining open to pandemics not happening to people's lives not being disrupted, like you can sign up for my retreat a year ahead, but then somewhere along the way, I don't know, maybe you get pregnant. And then you realize that going to India is not something that your pregnant body wants to experience? So I feel like the nature of retreats is volatile in itself. So yeah. What was your question?
How do you plan your year? But I wanted to ask a follow-up question to that.
Please.
How do you hold that uncertainty that you could plan a retreat and I mean, it's also your income, right? And there is a possibility of it not happening. Does it affect you in any way? Do you feel like you have to consciously hold the discomfort of it, or is it just part of life now?
It's something that I feel the resourcing of experience has really helped me to be okay with. So at this point in time, I am pretty much okay with any possibility, to be honest. Like, I do my best to plan it and market it, but if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen. Again, like, how can I unburden my mind? Or how can I live in a way that doesn't burden my mind necessarily? So I feel like over the years of sort of like navigating that has given me some sort of armor, I would say,
Mm,
to be not really affected. But I'm also a very practical person. So I'm very clear about how much I want to earn in the year and my target for the year. So I work on a project basis, right? Because I don't
mm,
teach at a studio. I don't teach regular classes. So I'm very clear how much I want to earn in a financial year, but I don't put too much restriction on how that is earned. Like how much each specific project has to bring in. I'm not too concerned with that. And I set my baseline at a healthy but relatively low amount. So I actually don't stress so much about hitting it. And then anything that comes up beyond that, it's a wonderful sort of like bonus and extra.
mm,
So in that way, I guess maybe financially, I am set up for things falling apart and not happening.
mm.
Does it make sense?
You are set up for things falling apart, as in you are prepared for it to,
Yeah, and I feel
like,
like over the years, I've also managed my finances pretty well. So I'm no longer the person who left teacher training with $17 in her bank account. So I feel like I've structured my life in a way that, if another pandemic has to happen or, I'm
mm,
not able to go overseas and lead retreats, I'll be fine. Yeah.
there
So
is still a
because of
buffer.
that, yeah, that doesn't really stress me.
Mm,
Can't say
and
I won't be disappointed if, I spend so much time on something, wanting to actualize it, and it doesn't happen. Of course, I will have those emotions, but I wouldn't have those like existential why me or oh I'm such a poor
Mm.
thing. No.
Did you used to have that?
The unofficial retreat that I had in Bali that I told you about in 2015, I had to shut it down because of immigration changes, and it was no longer okay for a foreign teacher to go and teach without kitas. So that was my first retreat. I put a lot of sort of like heart and soul into it, and the immigration change happened just 3 weeks before
Wow.
my retreat was supposed to go. So that was a very hard lesson in learning to not identify myself with, and again, it's coming back to that same thing. I put so much into it. I created it. Why is this happening? Why is
Mm.
it being taken away from me? It's already happening, like, and then the more we add on these narratives, the more we burden our mind. So back then in 2015, I didn't have the resources that I have now, so I took it
Mm.
very hard.
Mm. And what would the inner dialogue be now if you were to experience that exact same thing again?
Thank God, like it's canceled before I ran it, and then the
What?
immigration authorities hauled me off to jail. Like, wow, thank goodness it happened weeks before that, and I have time to sort of pivot and I have time to keep my participants safe because managing a retreat, especially running programs in places that are not as structured or not as, black and white as Singapore. I think safety of my participants is something that is of utmost importance. And I don't
Mm.
just see safety as physical safety, I see it as emotional and mental safety as well, meaning like, what if we're in a setting and then an immigration official comes in and hauls off your yoga teacher? That's going to make you feel unsafe as a participant, isn't it?
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah. Wait, I have two questions in my mind now. I'm going to switch the question. I wanted to ask you about your relationship with your teachers and with learning. Because
Mhm.
something I noticed about you is that you are always learning something new. And every time I look at your bio, you have like a new teacher included in your list that I've not seen before. Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about your relationship with like constantly learning and yeah, on this journey and learning from different teachers and like how you choose your teachers, things like that.
I always put their names on my website because I feel like it's so important for people to know the source of this knowledge.
Mm,
Like I've been on websites, like for example, let's say I am thinking to attend a training program or a retreat or anything with a teacher. The first thing I would do as my due diligence is to, of course, Google the hell out of that person to see what information comes up. But more than anything, my baseline is whether they credit their sources. Because one, if they don't, then in this day and age of like internet study or internet learning or learning from Instagram and whatever people are putting on YouTube, you can jolly well be teaching something that you just piece together from various undefined sources. And then how can I sort of like be comfortable learning that? And
mm,
if I resonate with it, possibly next time sharing it with my community. So that is a big no-no. Number two, I find crediting our sources is part of, like the yamas and the niyamas. It's satya, it's truth. It's, recognizing where the information came from. And I find that if somebody withholds that information,
mm,
then that also says a little bit about their character. And in this day and age, as much as I would study with a teacher because of their content, their, I don't know, character is equally, if not more important to me. Like somebody who doesn't hold themselves with integrity, I wouldn't want to be a student of them.
mm,
Mm.
mm,
So I wouldn't say that I go out on a hunt to find my teachers. And in fact, I feel like maybe it feels like a lot of names, but in this current sort of season of my life, The two people who I spend a lot of time with studying or just being in communication would be Emily Kuza, my first ever teacher trainer in Bali, and Nilufa Giri, who is my Vedanta teacher. And the other teachers, I feel like they came and they went in different seasons of my life, and I'm okay with that.
And you were speaking about like seasons in your life. Do you look at life by years? How do I put it? You experience it by the seasons. Like you don't define it as, okay, this is like my year, this is how I'm gonna plan, this is my yearly target. Do you just see life as more fluid in that sense?
No, I still see it as like a yearly thing. And maybe that comes back to your question about how I plan my
Mm,
year. I don't have a set structure of like how many retreats I want to run or all of that. Like I can only do something or create something when I feel that same pivotal urge that we were talking about. That same urge that says, nope, you gotta stop doing this and do something else is also that same voice of intuition that tells me, hey, you gotta do this.
mm,
So I feel like if I try to create a program based on intellect or, I feel like practical reasons, then most of the time the program falls through. Like I either lose the mojo to sort of like actualize it, or I would, squeeze something out of me, put it out there, and it just wouldn't resonate because
mm,
fundamentally it doesn't even resonate with me.
mm,
So I would say in that way, I am very fluid in the sense that I can only do something if my soul vibrates with enthusiasm.
mm,
Yeah. So I'm not too fixated on how many programs or how they should look like. But I am also very aware of like this is 2026 in terms of the year. Like this is the
mm,
year that I turned 40, so maybe that's why I feel, yeah, the passing of the years, I definitely have a sense.
mm. I recall a conversation that we had during yoga teacher training when you were having like one-to-ones, and I was asking you a question around, at that point I felt like I was so in a safe cocoon where I felt seen and understood by the people in that teacher training that I was afraid of stepping out back
Mm.
into the real world. Like at that point, I felt like there was a differentiation. Do you at any point experience that? Like how I came to this question is because you have a very different way of living in Singapore. Like you are not a typical Singaporean,
You keep
but
telling me that since we
you're not,
met.
you're not, at
Mm.
least in comparison to my circle, which is
Yeah.
also a narrow view, but from my perspective, you don't feel like it. And I feel like sometimes the question that I always have is, how do you survive in
Like money?
this, not money, but like personality, character? I think my comparison is that a lot of people around me are more, yeah, they have certain financial goals. They want to upgrade their house. They want to progress in their career. There is like a path or like have kids, and it is almost difficult to step out of that path just
Right.
because of the forces that even if you want something different, there is a lot of force needed to contend with that
Right.
pressure.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, seeing the way you live, it's like, how do you do it when maybe your circle is not like that, but like the general societal constructs and forces are there in the space that you are existing in and you're living. Yeah, what is your experience of it? Which may not be what I am seeing.
I'm curious to find out first from you, when you left the cocoon of teacher training, how is it for you?
I can't remember specifically, but I think what I brought to that asking what brought me to ask you that question was because we were having a lot of deep conversations.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, wow, once I step out into the real world, there's a lot of like gossiping, there's a lot of comparison, there's a lot of talking about what's next, instead of those conversations we had during teacher training. And I
Yeah.
really loved those conversations, and I didn't want to go back out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was how it was for me.
I don't feel any of that, to be honest. And I'm not sure I have ever felt that, to be
Mm,
honest. And sometimes I do wonder if it is my upbringing. My parents, especially my mother, they are very open-minded. Like I've never, from the start as a child, felt like I had to pick the school or take this particular course or come into this particular career. You know, I've never felt it growing up as a child. So, and I've always felt like they gave me the agency to
mm,
make choices as to how I want to shape my life. I can't say they were always happy with those choices, but they didn't seek to impose their
mm,
judgments, or at least not to sort of like curtail me from going
mm,
ahead anyway. So I feel like maybe my upbringing is very much the foundation for how I then went on to live my life in that way. And I feel like when you leave the corporate environment, it's
mm,
almost like the environment that you're in. We spend so much time at work, right? Or we spend so much time working that when your working environment changes, the people around you also change. And I find like my inner circle, a lot of them are yoga teachers or people whom I met through programs like retreats with you. And I don't feel that I actually spend too much time, if
mm,
at all, with people with whom I cannot have a nourishing conversation. Yeah.
mm,
So, you know, my worldview is sort of affirmed by their worldview. So, you know, like growing up, again, I've never been into brands. I've never been like until this day, I can recognize a BMW, I can recognize a Merc, but I can't recognize any other cars. You know, so it's just not in my
mm,
radar in that way. So, yeah, I really don't really feel the challenge that you're asking me about,
mm,
but I feel it's also coming from my upbringing and the people whom I choose to surround myself with. Like, there
mm.
will be times when I have to go to a gathering and it's, you know, like you said, you sit together and you end up gossiping or talking about, I don't know, very like unnourishing topics, I would say. And then I leave feeling way more depleted
Mm.
than I went. And I feel like the moment I feel like that after any sort of social engagement, that to me is a cue that, yeah, that's not resonating with me. I may give it
Mm.
another shot, or I may go if it's like a really important occasion, but otherwise, I actually don't spend time with people who don't nourish me.
I feel
Yeah.
like your response speaks to just really how important they say like the closest five people to you.
Yeah.
Like it really, it becomes your world. Like it's not the whole of your world, but just judging by how I see your experience versus your actual experience, the contrast of it really shows how important selecting that circle is. Like whether intentionally or like subconsciously, like who you choose to hang out with, what are their life values, principles they live by, how they look at life, finances, all these things. Like it really just like fits into like I think the word that you used is affirms, like affirm the way you live or not.
And I
Um,
really cannot imagine spending time with somebody and just talking about bags and makeup. Like, I can't, you know, like I can't.
you would have disengaged, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I might have tried my best to like be present, cut the outing short, and then never
mm,
go again the next time, maybe.
mm,
Yeah,
mm,
but it's like now that I'm sort of reflecting on what you said, I feel like I'm very, very lucky that my inner circle, like I really cannot pinpoint the five people that I spend the most time with, but there are maybe about 10 to 12 that I find like, you know, sort of surround my inner world. And a lot of these people are people whom I have known for more than 10 years, some for like half my life or more than half my life. So I feel like they have such a wonderful grounding effect in my life.
mm.
Like people like Edmund, for example, like we're such good friends. I don't see him a lot of the time, but when we do sit and, spend time together, it's
Mm.
never at a fancy cafe. He's always like, Yakuna, let's
Coffee.
go. Yeah. And then we have a cup of tea and we have like 2 or 3 hours of the most like amazing conversation. Yeah, and these are the people that I find I'm so lucky to be
Yeah.
surrounded
It's like a combination of privilege and also your own
by.
selection mechanisms. And I think also that willingness to act on it, because I also often hear people say that, oh, I really don't want to hang out with those people, but I have no choice. I think what you do
Yeah,
is that you act
you
on that.
always have a choice.
Yeah, you always have a choice.
Yeah.
It's whether
Yeah.
you want to do the difficult thing of like saying no or like knowing yourself well enough that this does not serve you. I think
Correct.
sometimes people also don't know that something doesn't feel good because they're not connected to themselves. So they just keep going along, like they're being strung along to whatever
Or
people are
maybe it's
doing.
some sense of FOMO. If I don't go, then I won't know what's happening in my friend group, something like that.
That's true.
But I would say to add on that, it's the agency to choose not to, but it's also the agency to choose to put in the effort to nurture these relationships.
That's
Like,
true.
like if I feel like, let's say we're both living in the same city. I would say, hey, we haven't met for a couple of months. What are you doing next week? Do you want to meet up for a coffee? Like, I am always doing that with the people who I love spending time with. I would never wait to be asked out, I would say. Always take the
It
initiative
makes a lot
to
of
ask.
sense.
So
Yeah.
I also actively participate in the shaping of my world. Does that make sense?
Like it's reciprocal, right? It's not just them asking you out. It's like two, like you can feel that the relationship is nourishing both ways, and then you
Correct.
build it together.
Correct. Correct.
Mm. I'm mindful of the time. I want to ask you
You can ask
one.
more. If you want to keep the recording going, we can speak for another 15 minutes if you
Okay, since we're on the topic of like relationships, I wanted to ask you about your conceptualization of like a community. Like, what do you, um, how would you define a community, and what is your experience building a community of practitioners or even your own community of friends?
like. I think a community, first and foremost, has to be like-minded. Like there has to be something that bonds you or brings you together. For example, outside of yoga, I have my Bollywood dance community, people whom I have known through dancing, and their love and the passion and enthusiasm for Bollywood dance is what keeps us together as a community. So I feel like first you need to have that shared language and that shared interest. I didn't actually intentionally or actively sought to build a community. I didn't seek to do that, to be honest. I think a lot of it was organic. But I would say if I had to describe the community that is living yoga, it would be generally practitioners who are called to experiencing or at least curious about what is there to yoga beyond asana.
Mm,
And I would say for me, for example, I practiced yoga asana for a couple of years, and then that hunger started, like this deep yearning to know more and experience more. I feel like maybe I would like to think that's what sort of draws people into the living yoga community.
yeah, I wanted to say also that somehow the retreats that we went on together, when you said like-minded, I really feel it. Like
Mm.
somehow, sometimes when random groups of people gather, there's always someone that you don't really like. Okay, yeah, that's my experience. Or like cannot click, you know? But I feel like always on these retreats with you, I think because the people you attract are so already like-minded. It
Mm.
always just, the group just, like we don't become BFFs, but like just gels in a very natural way. Whether we continue to be like in contact after, at least for those few days together, it really feels like a family kind of like when we have dinner together,
Mm.
really feels like comforting, warm, and just very safe, I would say.
to hear that. And I'm very
Mm,
lucky in that sense that, again, it's organic, no? Because I can't control who signs up for a retreat.
mm, mm.
Mm.
It's true.
Yeah. Which is,
Um,
again, coming back to our conversation, isn't it, on uncertainty. I
yeah.
said, like, running retreats are volatile right up to the participant list. I don't know who's
Mm.
going to sign up.
And the people going on it are also signing up if they didn't come with a friend. It's really just for you, right? They don't know who else is going to be there and what the experience is going to be like. So there's a lot of trust that it will be a good experience as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, but I've also learned along the way that it is not my responsibility to shape their experience on the retreat.
Mm,
You know what I mean? It's like I can do my best to plan it and shape it and contain it, but there are so many sort of like circumstances that are outside of my control.
mm,
So I've also learned that it is not healthy for me to expect everybody to have a good time.
mm,
And sometimes it's more poignant and important somehow in your life journey that you had a shitty time. But then that
mm,
shitty time makes sense in retrospect. And I've also made sense with, or I've made peace with the possibility that is, if I have to be the deliverer of that shitty time for you, then okay, so be it.
So would you say that your role is just to hold the space for things to happen? Like
Yeah.
just you lay out everything, you hold the space and just let it, just see where it goes.
Okay, Sarah, what will be, like, and this is where, again, it comes back to our conversation. I have to learn to let go of control at some point. Letting go of control doesn't mean not being responsible and not doing the due diligence at the start. That definitely has to be done. But at some point, there's only so much that we can anticipate and we can prepare for. And
Mm,
everything else is,
mm.
yeah.
Okay. Um, Let me just ask you one more question, like
Okay.
to close. I'm sensing into what I feel like asking the most.
I love it, by the way, that you're saying you're sensing. You're not thinking, you're sensing.
I used to think until I realized it doesn't work. Not
Mhm.
enough. What would you say to someone who has this next step that they really want to take, but
Mm.
they are just finding it hard, not because the step is hard, but because of the uncertainty that comes with that step?
Mhm.
Like, how would you respond to them?
What's the worst that can happen?
Mm,
To answer that question and to really distill it down. Like, I have a good friend, and she was having some issues with her boss. And, I think she was feeling really sort of torn up about wanting to leave the job. And she's been unhappy for years. So I remember we were sitting at a dinner after we went for a Vedanta talk with my Guruji, actually. So maybe I was
mm,
feeling particularly inspired. So, we were sort of like talking about her situation. And I remember asking her, like, what is the worst that can happen? You know?
mm,
And her first response was that I have to finance the house. And I said, yeah, but what's the worst that can happen? If you quit this job, get another job? And then her next reply was, oh, but it's really hard to find jobs in senior management. And then I say, what's the worst that can happen? Take a pay cut, go back to a junior management position. And then she said, well, what if I can't even find a job in this day and age and that? And I said, what's the worst that can happen? I'm sure Starbucks is always hiring, right? But we set all these sort of like glass ceilings on
mm,
ourselves. But and I asked her, if you work at Starbucks and they give you a full-time pay,
mm,
can you still finance your house? And she said yes, because it's HDB, it's not like a condo.
mm,
So then not getting another job in the way that you want is not the worst that can happen.
mm, yeah.
So
Mm,
I feel like oftentimes we think of like that worst case scenario with our conditioning and our fear sort of shaping it. But if we sort of sat with it and sort of lean into it and distilled our answer a couple times over,
Mm.
then maybe what's the worst is just all in your head
Mm.
within
And
practical reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And if say your friend doesn't want to work at Starbucks, then it's an entirely different conversation, right? That fear is not about financing the house. It's maybe afraid of bumping someone when you are working at Starbucks. Something like
Then the problem really then is not your boss.
mm,
Problem is your expectation of what you should be like in society.
yeah.
And then we could be really philosophical about that and be like, then that is your biggest stumbling block because that is burdening your mind. You think your boss is burdening your mind, but it's not. It's your own false expectation.
And that can be something so hard for people to hear or to accept about themselves. But that is often, I guess, what is needed to move through. Otherwise, it's gonna just be stuck. Like the conversation is just gonna end at, I can't do it. Like that is not an option. And just continue living an unhappy and unfulfilled life.
Yeah, I think it's always easier to see the problem as outside of ourselves, like my
Mm.
boss,
Yeah.
than the problem is us. And to be
Mm.
fair, my friend was complaining about a job for quite a few years, and I never gave advice until she asked me for it that night. When she
Um,
literally looked at me and asked, "What should I do?" But until
mm,
then, I also feel like it's not my job to impose my opinion or my judgment because unsolicited help can be very annoying, isn't it?
that's true.
Mm.
So how would you say, like, would you describe it as like when she complains about a job, it's just holding that space for that to, like, to
Yeah.
hold that and nothing else unless prompted?
Yeah, I feel like oftentimes, and this is me, when I want to share something, I often feel like the person that I shared with, if they're not so in touch with themselves, they then either want to draw parallels from their lives and start
Mm,
talking about the same thing or similar things that they experience, or they feel like I'm in a stitch and they want to fix me or help me fix the situation.
mm,
But I often feel that before that, when somebody shares something, they just
mm,
want to be heard
that's true.
more than anything, And the
Mm,
worst thing is to like, I'm confiding in you, and then you completely curtail the conversation and make it about you,
mm,
right?
mm,
But oftentimes, when we try to offer a solution, we are making it about us because we
yeah.
are offering advice from our perspective.
Mm. And we can never know that person's full experience to give a
Correct.
good
Correct.
solution.
Correct. But then if they come and they ask, what do you think? Or, is there anything you would do if you were in my shoes?
Yeah.
Then that's a different sort of dynamic. It's almost
Mm,
like, why do we pray? Why do we offer a candle? Why do we offer flowers to God? Because in that offering, we're opening that passage of receptivity. It's
mm.
almost like in offering, I'm telling God, like, hi, I'm here and I'm here ready to listen to you. Whereas if I don't take that first step to be in prayer, then how is God going to talk to me?
So it's a lot about like just space opening, holding it, and just receiving
Yeah,
and just seeing what happens, basically. Like also not with the expectation that something is gonna happen or drop in or like you're gonna receive something. It's just at least you open the channel, right? Otherwise, there will be no communication even to talk
right.
about. Yeah, and I also feel that when people ask, what do you think? It means that they are ready to receive. Like only until at that point are they ready to hear what you have to say. So even if we said something before, might be good intentioned, but it's like it's not gonna go through.
Correct. And I'm sure you have to navigate that a lot in the work that you do, right?
Yeah, I think it's how you describe like a lot of space holding and like walking together and looking at the what is needed at that point and then letting them drive, but like just going along and offering guidance just a little bit at the edge, not like pushing, but just a
Right.
little bit.
Correct.
Okay. I don't want to hold you back. I could ask you many, many, many things. Before we end, just wanted to ask you to maybe share your offering and how people can find you on
Okay.
socials or anywhere else.
So my upcoming offerings, we still, I guess, roughly have vacancy for a Hatha Yoga and Vedanta immersion in Bali that's happening in June. It's non-residential, which is why the vacancy is manageable. Um, that's happening 22nd to 28th of June, and that is also part of the compulsory hours for a 200-hour teacher training that I'm doing this year. And that's starting from that immersion all the way until end of August.
Mm,
Weekends only in Singapore. We have one last vacancy in a female twin sharing tent for a Ladakh retreat that I'm running 20th to.
mm,
So that's happening. And I haven't envisioned my life and offerings beyond that. Because after Ladakh, I'm going to travel for a bit. A group of old friends, they are flying into India to
mm,
celebrate my 40th birthday with me. So I'm just keeping it spacious and sort of leaning into how long do I want to stay in India and, continue my travels. Yeah. And if something comes up, it would probably be December or January,
mm.
retreat wise.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Instagram at Living Yoga with Leigh, Leigh, or my
And
website.
pop-up classes too, right?
Pop-up classes, yeah, but they're so like
Random,
oh,
sporadic.
yeah, I feel bad to talk about it, so let's not. Oh, you can
Yeah.
find me on Patreon, which is
Mm,
it's a what do you call it? It's like a platform where you get audio practices that I upload. I upload about an average of 4
mm,
every month. And yeah, it's a way to it's my way of helping you develop and keeping you on track in your home practice. And I find like oftentimes the reason I left studio teaching is because I feel like transformation can only happen in drips and drabs in a studio
mm,
class, but when you learn to listen to yourself, to lean into what it is you need, and then pick from the library of practices, it is your first step to developing a relationship of intimacy with yourself and knowing, to sort of have agency over your practice for the day. So that's
mm,
on Patreon, patreon.com slash yoga or living yoga with Leigh. And my website, Jasmine, I don't remember the URL.
Yoga.com.
That's
I
that's my
remember.
website. Yeah.
I will
So
put it in the description as well, like the
yeah,
links,
so
so
that's
people
how
can find them. And I also want to say that Patreon is where I get my dose of yoga from you, even till now. How many years have you been doing it?
I started 2023.
Yeah, I feel like I've been doing it since I moved
You
here.
moved to 2023, first part of the year. I started, yeah, Feb 2023, Chinese New Year. So
Mm,
it's been 3-ish years, and yeah, I will keep it up for as long as it feels aligned, I would say.
which we don't know when it's gonna end.
So don't thank you
Um,
for inviting me to sit and chat with you and for allowing me the honors of being your first guest.
Thank you so
I
much for
I
making
really found
time.
myself thinking, like, what is this podcast about?
It is about what you spoke about. I think because you live that, you don't need to
Uncertainty?
understand. Yeah, I feel like you
Right.
are the embodiment of that.
Okay.
So you don't need to understand what is.
So
It
the,
is
the
just
theme
you.
of your podcast is living, like navigating uncertainty.
Um, it's called uncertainty is possibility. So I think
Lovely.
the whole idea behind it is for people who are like me, who were like me, who are like me. who are like
Get
who
it.
I was in the past.
Yeah.
And not everyone has the privilege of meeting someone like you or like the other people I've met along the way who show them that this life is possible. So my idea of it is to let them hear it through the conversations I have with people that I know. Because I feel like often when we have that, when we see that someone else is able to do that, then we feel like, oh, maybe I can do that. They need that experience, even if it's through just listening to someone speak. Yeah, not
It's
everyone.
and it's a I feel like it's a wonderful platform because like Insta, for example, like you can go ahead and serve all those influencer accounts, but
Mm,
I guess, there's a part of us that may always wonder how much of it is staged and how much of it
yeah.
is authentic. And I feel like sometimes it's also only in conversation that, you know, the truth can come through.
It's very hard to act for like now if speaking for like what 2.5 hours. We can't be
Yeah,
like putting on a show for such a long time, you know?
yeah, yeah. So
Um,
all the best for your podcast,
Thank
and I
you.
look forward to seeing it or hearing it.
I haven't decided yet. Took a little break after a 2.5 hour session speaking with Leigh, whom I say at the start is the whole embodiment and the reason why I am even on this path of being able to embrace uncertainty and to see it as possibility. And of course, the other teachers that I've met along the way. But I really feel like she's the one who opened that door for me to even consider this life is possible for me. I am so glad that she has agreed to this, and now you can also take a little peek into her mind. There is, as always, so much to learn from her, and I think a large part of the reason is also because she's constantly reflecting, she's constantly learning from different teachers and integrating that learning into her own practice. And I feel like that is how I um, have come to live as well. Like a lot of what I'm doing now is inspired by how she lives her life. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, I would love to hear them and to continue the conversation um, wherever you may be listening this podcast. Um, and if you have any other suggestions on what you would like me to speak about in this podcast, or people you feel like I should speak with, do just drop me a DM as well. I would love to have that conversation with you to chat more about it. Okay, I think that is all from me today, and I will catch you again next time. Bye.